Hey Andre, how's it going? Great to see you.
Great to see you too.
I think last time we saw each other, we were doing magic tricks on a boat.
We were. Nobody's gonna believe that, but that's what happened, and it was super fun.
Yeah, I think that's one of my favorite parts is that we travel around the world and get to meet interesting people that are doing some of the best things. We've seen a lot of great people doing Dow tooling stuff today and yesterday. We got to meet with people that are building the infrastructure. Today, we're going to be talking about deep work. Is that right?
Yes, Deepwork and Deepskills.
Awesome. Yeah, it's definitely a process that I've employed in some of my teams, but I'll let you introduce it. And thank you very much for coming today. The floor is
Cool.
yours.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me as well. I'm gonna share a couple of slides. Most of what I'll be talking about is focused basically on the idea of how I've or basically how creating decentralized organizations works based on my experience from building Deepwork. And I also try to summarize a couple of key principles for how to actually approach the design of organizations. A little bit of context for this. Over the last 4 years, I built a design studio called Deepwork, which is kind of adheres to a lot of principles that we see in or that we recognize in the concepts of DAOs. So everybody who's contributing to the organization is a freelancer. Everybody works there because they like to work on it. There's no contracts for work, and yet over the last 4 years, we've designed over 40 different projects in the Web3 ecosystem, and a lot of them you'll be familiar with. Feel free to check it out. And also, I kind of want to emphasize or like thank everybody who's participating in Deepwork or has been working together with us, whether as a client or as a freelancer, because without all of these interactions, none of the knowledge and none of the research would have been possible to share because it's almost like having a little model of something that works with real people. So that's what everything is based on. And I'll get a little bit of like context on how it's designed because a lot of the ways that the organization is built is slightly different from how normal businesses are set up, and also different from how communities are. And they have specific kind of, I think, modes of perspective or like different perspectives on work in general. And so just before I get into that, I wanted to share um, uh, a piece of history about work. Because before the Middle Ages, work was considered as something that's like just a substantial part of life. And it was just like sleeping or eating. And then through the Middle Ages, Christian chauvinists said that it's a good idea to combine doing work with the idea of being a good person. So if you do good work, you're a good person, you get your salary, the profits go to the church, church distributes the profits across the poor people, and in the eyes of God, that's a good thing. And that same kind of mentality shifted over into the industrialization, where people thought, okay, let's take the same kind of social principles, and you are only part of like a well-functioning part of society if you can actually do work. And it's exactly the same thing, except this time factory owners were the ones who would distribute the profits as they wanted. And neo-economists picked up on that, and they thought that this is kind of okay. We see that the economy works that way, so we see that people actually do the work, and then they just afford leisure. They don't have to like the work. In fact, most people perceive work as a disutility or a necessity. But because they can balance it out by buying good things, the economy starts flourishing and everything is good, and that's a great thing. But like the reason why I'm preempting the whole thing with something more kind of historic is that I actually think that that's not a good model to think about work. And there are a lot of different perspectives. And I think that specifically now we have the opportunity to think and to approach work from a different perspective, more from a perspective of that work is a meaningful part of life, and people generally like doing work. It's just that these principles have put us in a place where it almost like it enforces us to approach it as like a disutility. But I don't think that's generally true. I think we all find things that we love working on. And I also think that if we want to design and build good organizations that people want to get interested in and start working with and enjoy their work, then we have to kind of start with that perspective of, we want to love the work. So let's just build an infrastructure where people actually feel good about working together rather than seeing it as a necessity or just utility. And so maybe like the only thing that we should consider is that work should be meaningful. So people are interested in contributing to a meaningful purpose, working together, and seeing how collaboration works. But then also, making sure that they feel fairly compensated. So this is kind of I think the first principle that I would start with, is that just work is a meaningful part of life. And from there, things become actually quite easy, because even if you're like collaboratively working with other people, you want to focus on like, okay, what do we love doing? And then where do we bring value? There's a lot of things that people do that just don't bring value at all, that are fun and enjoyable, and that's cool. But I think if we want to form organizations, then we want to look at like, what's the value proposition and what can we bring to society? And also obviously choose the environment we work in. I think that we always have the choice to look at, what is the cool future, and then who will we actually bring the value to? And if we position ourselves and bridge that gap between creating value and the receivers of the value, and if we kind of work on that, then we can find this kind of the comfort and sustainability in ourselves and in our group of people we work with. And only then later we will layer on the business model, because business model is just making that value exchange visible. And I think that it's also kind of often seen that businesses start by just like, let's create a business model, make it work, make money, make it sustainable, but then it doesn't actually value or benefit anyone. So I think kind of starting from that makes a lot more sense. And also that will solve the problem of competition. So if we don't have to see competition as a race, or have to be better at something, at someone. We just kind of focus on what we do well, which is something that online communities actually do really well, which is just kind of people flourishing or like gravitating towards certain content and then interacting with that content. Except, and actually, the cool thing communities also do that we can learn from is that they create a social network of profiles of people who are already verified, that you can look into their like contributions and get to know them before you actually interact with them. Before you start like messaging them, you can get a really good sense of who they are. And I think that's also something that's that we can get inspired by, because on like our way to build organizations. And the only thing that is that we also still need to pay attention to is obviously that online communities don't have a business model, and we do need to focus on making it profitable, because we want to make it sustainable. But merging those two, this is kind of the idea of what is shown in the middle. That's the key. That's like the goal of what we can create if we want to create like decentralized and online native organizations in general. And I think the way that they will look is probably just having people who are who can all decide on what they want to work on, when they want to work on these things. They can enter organizations at any point in time. They can leave them. They can they know that all the work is fully transparent, and they have that portable reputation that shows someone else that they do something well before they start working with them, and can give confidence and collaboration. The only thing that still needs to be solved, and this is why I also, by the way, think that DAOs don't really exist yet, maybe aside from Bitcoin, is this kind of financial stability. So right now we don't have that financial stability and that financial certainty that we can just like go out and work on anywhere, and we're cool and everything's going to be like stable. I think that is going to happen over the next couple of years. But I also think that it's solvable because there are really good models for organizational design. Block Science is, for instance, Block Science are writing really good research on the so-called viable system model, which is essentially a description of a model, how you can organize as a group and essentially mimic the principles of biological organisms in organizational design. Really good work. I really recommend checking it out or reviewing that, because it's applicable to any stage of any organization. And if a lot of these organizations adhere to these principles, which we'll get to in a moment, then I think that can stabilize the economy and stabilize how we all just get to work on cool stuff. And so the next thing that I think is worth considering when designing organizations is that I think that chronological time is not a good measure of, or not an adequate measure for work. And we can see that with the UK recently has reduced the working week to 4 day weeks, 4 hour days, also possible, 4 day weeks without lowering the salaries. And there's a lot of these examples, but they make it obvious that the tracking the time is not representative of the quality of the work. And the same goes for hour tracking or so. It's been popular or applied for freelance work, but it doesn't really work. So it's people either don't want to track their work or they track too many hours, and it doesn't do justice. What I do think is a good measurement is it's kind of project-based work. So if you see projects as a primitive that has a very specific process, or let's say very specific outcome, the deliverable, you have a very specific process that leads to that outcome, and then you have a duration, and that can be kind of categorized, and you can work a lot better with that if you compare that project to another project, because if you compare all these parameters, then you see where it deviates, and you can also actually quantify the cost for that. And this is also actually how Deepwork started, because we took something that's like a design service that would be normally seen as something that has no particular no particular scope, or it's very intangible type of work, but we kind of packaged that into something that's almost like a product process project. So it's we started with exactly 7 days. It's exactly this specific outcome, and here's the process. You can read it up. It's public, and that's the design sprint. And now we're just structuring all kinds of work in the same way, and it actually has a lot of benefits that I get into in a second. But you can do that with any kind of work. So you just need to kind of scope it out. And if you wanted to make sure that that actually works on the market, whether you're selling a service or it's an internal project for building something, you're scoping it out. What's the process, duration, outcome? You count the hours that it takes to produce that project. It's probably going to be recurring if you're looking at kind of how it works. And then compare the market, compare the hours and the cost of the hours to the market rate. And then you have the cost of the project, and just kind of negotiate with either an internal stakeholder or an external party whether they would like to pay for that outcome, that specific amount. And the shorter the negotiation in general, the closer you are to the cost of the value. So this is kind of the second thing that I think is very important to start off with, and I think also kind of worth considering whether you're starting a DAO or whether you're creating a new project that you want to work with other people. Try to kind of consider everything into projects and measure the outcomes rather than the time it takes to get to these outcomes, because that way you can also get really close to something like a meritocratic payment, where you have that process, or you have that project, you calculate the time, everybody gets paid exactly what the worth is on the market. And also, by the way, you can also you have a lot more points for measurement. So those of you who might have worked at a or who work at a job, or who haven't participated in a larger organization, know that it's also kind of important to make sure that certain things have there's a way to measure the process, because things change and evolve. So you need to pay attention to things that change internally or externally. But at the end of each project, you have that opportunity where also people can come in or leave, or you can have opportunities for improvement internally. And also that offers the ability for like the kind of tracking reputation. So like a person has completed that project. Awesome, they do it well. Here's exactly what happened during that project. And as a side effect, especially through like economically challenging times, all of this process makes it easy to be very flexible in uncertainty. So if there's no work, then no projects happen, and that's fine. So you don't have to pay people on a salary if no work is happening. But at the same time, it encourages everybody to actually focus on, hey, what can we actually do to produce more of that work that we really like? So it kind of activates everybody. And also, I know that the kind of consideration of what a project is very subjective. So obviously, in specifically organizations that we want to work in, we don't want to have a single person being like, hey, this is a project now, you get to work on this. Equally, we might not want to be like, hey, let's just like do whatever. The design thinking workshops are actually a very good tool to align a team onto what the specifics of a project is. So this is kind of the third thing I think is going to kind of pop up more and more, is that I think that these design thinking tools are actually very useful, even though they've been like kind of destroyed by shitty consultants in the Web 2 world, or made very uncool. But I think they have a very specific purpose if they're really done well, because they align people on something that is very hard to align normally in a very short amount of time. So I really recommend looking into design thinking, or like IDEO and like design sprints and stuff to play around with it. I am also happy to share any of the what do you call them, templates that we have. So we run these workshops all the time, and I can later run you through those if you have any questions on how to do those. But yeah, I think that's kind of a very useful tool. The other thing, if you think about projects, and this is also kind of where Deepskills is what that's built for, at least the application that we currently have, is that you don't actually have to think about recruiting anyone or hiring people, because you offer always opportunities for people to come into the projects, work with someone who's already there, and then leave if they want to, but like in an upskilled way, or just like stay within the organization and grow together. So it's kind of a very decentralized way of scaling an organization, because you just make the projects public, and then people can come in and contribute. The interesting part, and this is like from my personal experience with building and designing and like working within Deepwork, is that unlike with a traditional job where you come in and you start working, and you have a kind of obligation to complete work over a longer period of time, people realize that they can get excluded from the organization at any point in time, because the cost of firing is zero. Like nobody has to sign any contracts, like no long-term contracts. Nobody has to kind of have any discussions of kicking someone out. There's no like, it's just not a thing. There is no such thing as firing someone. It's just like, well, if the collaboration didn't work well, then I'm just not going to work with you anymore and pick someone else instead. And that's kind of an unspoken rule that becomes very, very evident very, very quickly. And what that does is that it makes everybody really, really aware of the social network that is underlying the whole collaboration. So everybody pays a lot more attention to how the interactions work, and who they interact with, and how they present themselves, how they help, how they learn, how they pay attention to things, how they point out when they like something or they don't like something. And that's good for those who are entering the organization, like new contributors who just want to learn, and they want to do the work because they like the work, or just also want to get paid for it. And it's equally good for those who are inside the organization already, or like, let's say not inside because there's no like real in or out, but those who are like vetted experts. They become mentors. They have a chance to refine their skills, teaching someone new something that they haven't like really solidified like that so far, or maybe like not passed on enough, and get better at communicating that. And they also develop all these things that we call soft skills, like like mentoring in general, but also project management and hiring. All of these things that that we have, like, again, usually centralized departments for, or certain like little ecosystems and organizations. They become this decentralized fabric of values, like cultural values in the organization, and that's almost like, yeah, like a substantial part. So people also get incentivized to make the organization more and more high quality. So that's just to the case that hiring is like a completely different game in that sense, because people just want to find high quality collaborators and just naturally like gravitate or like kind of, yeah, find together better people. And actually, on that same note, nobody like at this point, for none of this we actually require blockchain technology. Everything of that is just like kind of social or project management stuff that can be done with no code tools, and we've done that. Basically, Deepwork is built mostly based on no code tools, and you can like put it all together in the same way, and only now we're slowly introducing. And of course, you can, or you should also use tokens in order to generate something like, or like create a sense of ownership across everybody. Like OneHive is a great example, but actually really any community that we can see has a great, like this great tool of tokens being an attractor and a sense of taking part or being part of an organization that we are all kind of sharing. And that makes sure that people also take care of what they really do for the long term. So any short-term decisions like who they work with or who they want to hire also reflects kind of for the long term. So I kind of still want to just really emphasize on these social relationships, that like creating these meaningful relationships as an important part of building an organization, rather than like trying to hire the best candidate, or as a candidate, like finding the best job and like having the ability to fake the CV or something. So yeah, I think that's just kind of on a side note. And then the other thing is that when you combine these things, you can go a little bit more granular into description of the individual roles and projects, in terms like writing out the proper documentation of work that's very transparent. Not only sets the quality standard for the work, like McKinsey, for example, or like Bridgewater are doing. That's what they're really famous for, that they have like these feedback loops, but they also have a very high quality documentation internally. It makes it easier to hold the quality standard. But now, as a decentralized organization, we can make that public, so we don't have to think about competition. We just make that public, and it acts as an attractor for work, so people now just gravitate towards these things. So that's another kind of, I think, key principle, is that use transparency of internal processes to attract people and qualified contributors. Because there's no, like, if you're the only ones who can do the work, there's no competition. There's no reason to hide it away. In fact, you can, if you wanted to, you can copy paste Deepwork already and create your own design studio. But you would do that in a different environment. You would do that under different conditions. And I actually really hope that these things happen more. Another thing that, and I'm just going to kind of speed up a little bit here, but another thing that we also do is that if you have these roles that you define specifically, so like, what is someone's contribution to a particular project? Like, what's that role? That's essentially data points for that reputation of a single person. And you can play with these artifact, like data points. You can, first of all, visualize the dominance hierarchies. You can offer people ways to traverse them in any way. But you can also do things like adding token weights. So if you use things like Snapshot or similar tools to kind of offer direct democracy, you can make sure that certain roles have higher weights, because they might just carry higher responsibility, because being a particular role requires a lot more knowledge and a lot of decision making that you wouldn't have in a different role. So you can kind of influence the way that direct democracy works in that way, and everybody still owns their position and their contribution. That's a whole different topic of direct democracy that I'm not going to go into now, but that's just kind of to touch on that surface. And also, yeah, like if that's transparent, it offers people to like, again, like fork these things, fork these roles, create their own organizations, because everything is, you know, open source like software. But also like improve the processes internally. So once people work together and they know that something needs improvement, they are the ones who own the role. They have the ability to improve it as well, or yeah, they would contribute to improving it. Given that they actually also know what's going on, so I think that it's also important to show people what's going on. But because, you know, if you projectize it rather than having work streams, and if you have very specific roles which are, you know, like calculatable or countable, you can provide a lot more data to people. So if you have a network of individuals, and this is it's called Alfa problem, maybe some of you know it, which essentially says that the more strategies an individual can create around taking part in a particular organization or community, the better it is for the equilibrium state of the entire community. So the more data we can provide, the better it is for everyone. And then the last thing that I want to touch on is this like idea of portable reputation. Reputation has been locked up for a very long time in organizations for the reason of like personal privacy, but also like a competitive advantage. And sure, there are things like LinkedIn where you have the like attestations from someone else, but you still have kind of a personal profile, or portfolios where people kind of curate the information or like the work that they've done. But they're like, again, they're mostly self-attested and like easily forgeable. But if we look at the roles as something that gets verified by the organization from the inside of an organization, as that is essentially the same thing as if you look at them as skills from the outside. So if you look at someone who has a particular role in an organization from the inside, and you know exactly what the work was that they were doing, then from the outside, you look at that same thing, you see the outcome of the organization, and you realize, oh, that's the skill that the person has in that organization. And so over time, obviously, there's like a lot of different ways to gather reputation, but this is something that's I think going to be very, very important, that we'll be able to carry that reputation across different areas and different organizations. And I think also we'll have I think there were a couple of other talks today that went into that direction as well, which is really a good sign for that becoming an important part of how society operates, because we need to get more and more of an idea, like, you know, in online forums where we see people's past messages or past contributions, or like in Reddit, their posts, except for like actual work, and it's extensible. And so this is the last step. Like, I think portable reputations has the ability to show people's skills throughout the entire ecosystem, given obviously that people still own their own reputation data. So I think like zero knowledge proofs, or the concept for a soul-bound token, I think is also quite an interesting one that falls into that category, where it's possible to retain the information on your own kind of profile, but then to the outside share the things that are really important for someone who wants to work with you and make that connection. So in the future, I think we'll get into like a lot of opportunities to share, to actually work with these roles, and to almost probably have a marketplace of individual roles, and predict which roles and which project to take part in, or have a lot better KYC systems, and like, you know, bank loan applications and stuff like that. Sounds boring, but I think it's actually quite an important part of how the economy could be a lot more stable. So yeah, overall, I know I just covered a lot, and it's been like in all over the places. Feel free to check out things like Deepskills, or I actually didn't even show you that. So this is just a tool that how it works with what we have. If you follow that principle of doing it project-based, you can let me know, and I'll onboard you into Deepskills, where you can just like put up your project and then say like, this is the skill of a creative director, or whatever your role is, and then whoever wants to can apply, and then we can choose whoever wants to apply from here, and then work together in like this buddy system, and then have the verifications at the end, so you can see kind of these are the skills that I have, for example. and this is the project. It's very fresh, so there's only one project here so far. I just wanted to give you a glimpse. Also happy to show more of that later. Yeah, so all of these things, work as a meaningful part of life, project-based work, the high-quality documentation, mentorship, design thinking, reputation tools, all of these are obviously very deep concepts. I just wanted to kind of scratch the surface on these things because I think they're important to consider, and regardless of the tech or the way that you use them, because they will help to actually make the organizations a lot more resilient and the infrastructure that we're creating together a lot more kind of stable, also in terms of the financial stability that I mentioned in the beginning, that people will have this ability to jump back and forth and have a lot of more confidence on what they want to work on and how they make choices in their life and want to contribute to if there are a lot of different DAOs that do this. So if you're interested in more of that, follow me on Instagram and Twitter. I started posting very short 1-minute videos a couple of weeks ago to go through a lot of the things that I've learned over the last years building Deepwork, ranging from actually kind of working on products and on product design, but also in organizational design and how to get from like an idea to something, user research, etc. And please also ask any questions. I will answer every message and any comment. I'm also very interested in what challenges you're facing with, because it helps me kind of communicate it a lot clearer how what would be the most efficient way to approach this. Also, feel free to join this Sunday. Deepwork has an online event. You can join on Discord if you go to docs.deepwork.studio. I know I'm over time. I'm already wrapping up. So Deepwork.studio, and then go to Quick Start Guide, join the Discord, and then the Start Here channel explains add the calendar, and then that'll be on the 19th of June. So yeah, with that, thank you so much. Sorry for the 3 minutes over time.
No worries. We're friends. It's more about sharing information than it is about watching the clock. So I definitely appreciate the information and everything that you're saying. I think that the hardest part that you really touched on is planning, and a lot of people kind of rush into things without thinking things through, without the planning. They think planning might slow them down, and I'll say 100% it will not. With very certainty, planning will not slow you down. It'll make sure that all the people that are in the organization contributing know the expectations, they know the goals, they know they're aligned. And when you use the process to incorporate people, then you can have them participate. They actually have ownership over what they're doing instead of just being another worker. So yeah, the tools that you're providing are amazing. I love the Deepwork Legos, meeting Legos. So definitely, I'll post the information for the chat and how people can join the Discord, and look forward to the Sunday event as well.
Nice, awesome. Thank you so much, Penguin. And it was a pleasure to be here and see you again and see everybody else again.
Yeah, I shall see you again soon. Thank you so much. Ciao.